Let's talk about Crystal B versus auto ships in the early game. But first off, where do we put our crew? For a long time now, I've started one in teleporter and one in sensors, and of course you have the pilot. And then I'm going to move into teleporter with the pilot during the FTL jump. They won't get all the way there, but they're getting closer there in case we decide we want to board with 3. And I'm also venting cloaking just as standard because if you get 4 boarders into there, then you just can't vent it out in time. But that's not really relevant to this video. Anyway, this is the setup that we're going with, and then we jump. And now I want to look at this fight. We know that this is a heavy laser and a Leto, and I'm particularly concerned about Letos because these are one of the fastest weapons and they can also cause a breach. So, let's take a step back. What are you trying to do with boarding against auto ships on Crystal B? You're not trying to win the fight. You can't really do that, not without sacrificing crew. Yeah, I know there is technically a way, but we're not covering that today. So all you're trying to do is decide, is it safe enough to board so I can punch down their weapons and then reduce hull damage, or even in really bad fights prevent myself from dying. Because bear in mind, we could get, even with this fight, some bad situations where the Leto goes into shields, even with cloaking, and then the heavy laser is live. So let's just look at this fight first. The reason I start a crew in sensors is that it gives us immediate vision onto enemy crew, and sometimes that information might be useful. And it seems like it's a very short walk into teleporter there. With one crew stationed there already, they don't need to get all the way in, like so. Like, now we can board. And something you might think about here is they only have 2 weapons levels. So we could try pre-cloaking, and what happens then? They just get a missile off. Now the problem with this is it could hit our teleporter, and it's also hull damage that we don't really like, but it could hit our teleporter, and potentially if it causes a breach we could be in a lot of trouble, but more on that later. I've said that I've put a crew in sensors for a really long time now, but I actually just changed that. And what I've started doing just now is saving their positions here. So that's where they start, and then I select these 2 and click on the teleporter and just let them start moving and then jump. So now you see we start with both crew in the teleporter, and watch what happens. We can board immediately and pre-cloak. And we will in fact punch down this missile. Wait and see. There you go. Now that is 100% guaranteed because there's no variance in how long it takes to board and punch down the weapons. And for me, personally, I think this concrete benefit is more relevant than a sort of theoretical benefit that sometimes I might want the sensor information, right? And this could apply not just to automated ships, by the way, because, for example, if you have a layout where they have 2 crew and the engines room isn't directly next to the weapons room, then you could do the same thing, instant boarding, switching off the Leto missile before it can fire. And of course, if for some reason a fight is complicated and I want to look at sensors, I can still do that. It's just gonna delay me slightly more. Let's look at a more serious example. This enemy has a burst laser 2 and a Leto missile, so there's no way that we can force both of their weapons offline before they get to fire. And in fact, I'm pretty sure it's always going to take down the burst laser 2 in this particular case, so don't quote me on that just yet. The point is, you can't plan around it taking down the weapon that you want to go down. Assuming they keep the Leto up, then it is going to get to fire. And that could potentially be something to worry about. Because you have to think about what happens if they hit you in the teleporter. In a sense, teleporter is the only system that matters, because as long as that isn't hit, you can always get your crew back. But cloaking actually could matter as well, because if they hit you in the cloaking, then they might get a second missile off, and maybe that one can hit you in the teleporter. Anyway, let's have a look at this. I've given myself a breach bomb just to simulate a hit into a particular system. So let's say you wait for the missile to arrive on your side of the screen so you can see it, and then you cloak. And then it hits you in cloaking, like so. They are now going to get a second shot, and look at the cooldown on our teleporter here. It's pretty tight. Okay, so it just came off, but you see how that missile could potentially have come in from here and hit teleporter before we were able to retrieve our crew. And if that happened with a breach, then our crew are definitely dead. So this is a concern. How much should you be worried about this? Well, it turns out the answer is not at all if you time your cloak right. Let me show you. Same thing. Board into weapons straight away. And I'm going to fire the breach bomb at the same time. Maybe even earlier. Just fire it immediately. But now that the missile has turned green, I'm going to cloak right away. And what that means is that we get all this travel time between their ship and our ship for our cloak. And even with the breach bomb firing under cloak, which is reducing it by 20%, that is still going to be enough time to break the missile. You see? No problem. So it turns out that if you time your cloak correctly and cloak early rather than cloak late, then the Leto missile hitting your cloaking is not a threat at all. Alright, that's a good start, but what about hits directly into teleporter? Well, you can actually calculate this stuff, but it's maybe just better if I show you. We board immediately again, and we're going to cloak at the same time when the missile fires. And this time we're targeting our teleporter. And now we have a really big problem. Because I have to walk all the way over there and repair this breach and repair the system. Now, just in case you didn't know, the time taken to repair a breach is the same as the time taken to repair a single bar of system damage. So we're doubling our repair time once we're in the room from 12.5 seconds to 25 seconds. And you can see there just isn't enough time. Our crew are dead, and we've almost repaired the teleporter, but not quite. So, does that mean that it's just too dangerous to board? Well, there is actually a solution. There is something you can do better. Maybe pause the video, see if you can think about it for a moment. Okay, we board into weapons. The first thing I'm going to do is vent the teleporter, because otherwise fires could be a problem. This Leto missile can start fires as well. Instead of. If it starts a fire, it won't cause a breach. As long as the room is vented already, then the fires will go out really fast, so that's not a problem. The breach is the concern. And the other thing is I'm going to cloak without a pilot. I'm not leaving my pilot over here, and this does mean we drop down from, 75% evasion to 60% evasion, so we are more likely to get hit. This probably feels very counterintuitive, and it probably feels wrong, but it is in fact correct. Oh, he actually hit us twice. Actually really hit us in the teleporter. Even with that breach bomb, taking away another 25 health, and walking to teleporter and getting smacked by the missile, our crew is going to be completely fine. Crystals take 50% suffocation resistance, of course. Suffocation damage. No, don't open the airlocks. Alright, so you can see our crew has 13 health to spare. That's about 4 seconds or so of extra health. And by the way, they don't take any damage warping in or out of the enemy ship. They don't take any suffocation damage. Now this actually becomes a bit interesting finishing off this fight. It's not as critical, but it's interesting. We're going to heal up. Because of the delay that we had getting our crew back, they're going to repair the missile. So we are taking another point of damage. Or rather, we're taking another missile shot. So I'm going to walk into engines to give myself the best chance of cloaking that. And then go into teleporter. And board as soon as our cloak comes off cooldown. You have to be fairly prompt about this because this is going to be firing again soon. Alright, we've taken it down again, and now we're just waiting for our teleporter. So the teleporter is ready, but I'm not going to bring them back. Not yet. If you think about it, we just waited 20 seconds, and then there was another 10 seconds or so, maybe a bit more, roughly, after they repaired their weapons for the first time. In all of that time, although you can't see it, they're still repairing their weapons, right? You don't interrupt partial weapons repair. So this missile is about to come back online. There you go. And now we can retreat. And of course, all this time we're charging our FTL. Your goal in these fights is to make yourself safe and then leave. Okay, all done. We can jump away. Okay, does that mean we have solved the fight and it's always safe to board? Unfortunately, no. We need to discuss the elephant in the room, Crystal Vengeance. That wretched augment is still on my ship. Let's take a look. Here it is. I've actually modded this to be 100% just for demonstration. And I've also given myself stealth weapons because it will turn out that this actually matters when we're firing our breach bomb. And of course the breach bomb is just there for simulating hits into teleporter. So now we will get the full duration of our cloak. And let's just take a look. Okay, well to start with we're going to board. And you can see the punching progress here. They do the first point of damage just before the Leto fires. I'm actually going to let this hit, meaning pass our shield barrier, like so, because I want to make sure that it does trigger Vengeance. I will use my cloak now so we get the time from the cloak. Okay, here comes Vengeance. You can wait until it's just gone off your screen, roughly. And then what do? You see, we're very close to breaking another level, but we do have to move our crew out now. I mean, imagine that Vengeance decides to come from this side of the screen. You're not going to be able to get them out in time. Even if you have them in the doorway, you just might not be able to react. You have to give yourself a little bit of margin here. So the first thing I'm going to recommend is that you split your crew. Like this. And the reason for that is just to make absolutely sure that they don't both get hit by the same vengeance shard. I am keeping one crew in weapons for now, and then the thing that feels really natural to do is this. Right? So we dance them in the doorway. Here comes vengeance. Oh boy, this is a tricky one. But the point being, I didn't leave the room, meaning that the sabotage progress is retained. And I would be, if this was heading into weapons, then I would probably be able to get get out of the room before it hit. So I'll definitely go back with that crew. But where is this one going? It's quite hard to tell. Okay. What I would normally do with this sort of thing is line up a sheet of paper, which I'll just let it get fully on the screen, with one end and the other end of the projectile. I've got it up on the screen now, and then I draw a line to where that is going. And it should be targeting the center of a room, but it actually doesn't look like it is. It looks like it might be targeting here or here. So this is just a tip in general for dodging vengeance. The sprite is not lined up in the normal way. It's slightly angled, and it also looks, I think, more angled than it is because it's asymmetrical. Anyway, the effect of it is if you line up a piece of paper or even just eyeball it, you'll see this line going kind of through here. And that looks like where it should be traveling. It's actually not. It's aiming for either this center of the room or this center of the room. And the way that you can accommodate this is just to take wherever it looks like it's going and then project it slightly more anti-clockwise, so to the left of the projectile's travel direction. Right? So anyway, I don't think it's piloting because that would be here. I think that's too much. Yeah, okay. So then we can go, I guess, does it make a difference? I'll do that. Then we can go back into the weapons room and try to break this before it can fire again. And we will be able to do it this time. Notice it was quite close. This time I've given it a shield, and what's interesting about this is it actually improves the tactic that we can use slightly. So I'm going to do the same thing. Let the missile hit, cloak. Here comes vengeance. We need to start moving our crew. There's a trick I'm using here to help judge this one's position a little bit by this one because I moved this one ahead of time. But the other thing that will help there is that if I didn't have the sensors, you'd be able to see the rooms light up, right? So you know which room this one was in, and you can use that to judge this one. Anyway, we move them in the doorway. You have to watch out with this kind of micro because occasionally they will just keep going for a moment, so you might have to reorder them. It's quite strange. So leave yourself a little bit of padding. Okay, here it comes. This is a difficult one. That is heading for weapons. Now, because it has a shield, we can see that this projectile is already hitting. So while we will lose all of that partial damage, we will at least get a bar of damage from the Crystal Vengeance hitting. Right, so we can now leave the room and watch my crew's health. We dodged it, and we go back in. It doesn't help that they actually hit us indoors. Of course, that couldn't happen because we got hit an extra time by the breach bomb. And you see, we just break it in time. And both our crew live because of that micro. Okay, we're back to the shieldless example from before, and you'll notice I'm doing something different this time. That's because what I did the first time was actually wrong. So this time, I'm not even attempting to move this crew out the weapons room. And that's because now that they don't have a shield, we cannot know whether this projectile is going to hit or miss. So if we leave the weapons room and then this misses, they'll have 2 weapons bars because we lost all our partial progress. And the missile will fire again. If it causes a breach in teleporter, then both of our crew are dead. It is much better to lose 1 crystal than both of them. Like, it's not even comparable. You can, if you started the game with only 2 crystals on this ship, you'd still be completely fine almost all the time. If you go down to 1, it's much, much harder. Anyway, that crew is now dead. They just don't know it. But that's okay. And, you know, forget about the human. They don't exist. Okay, teleporter is not quite repaired, but this crew is dead. Never mind. You can still win. Now might be a good time to talk a little bit about the odds of all of these things happening, because they are pretty low. First off, the chance that the Leto targets you in teleporter is about 14%, and then there's a 40% chance to hit, and a 9% chance to breach. Now those are all independent events, so you can get the probability of them all happening together by multiplying those values together, and you end up with about 0.5%. In other words, 1 in 200. That's pretty low, but it is also something that is pretty reasonable to plan around. The chance of Vengeance triggering is 1 in 10, and the chance of it targeting the weapons room specifically is 1 in 5. So overall that's 1 in 50 for a Vengeance to trigger that then targets your crew in the weapons room. I'm going to ignore the enemy ship evasion. That does actually bring the chances down a little bit, but it's variable, so let's forget about it. It doesn't actually matter. Anyway, what that means is you have a 1 in 200 chance to get hit in the teleporter through cloaking with a breach, and a 1 in 50 chance for that to trigger Vengeance that targets your crew. So overall, that's a 1 in 10,000 chance for all of those things to happen together. That is very unlikely indeed, and it would be perfectly reasonable to say, I don't even need to plan around the Vengeance at all. With that being said, once you see that it's happened, once you see that Vengeance shard spawn, and all the other stuff has already happened, then you're not looking at a 1 in 10,000 chance anymore, you're looking at a 1 in 5. So it's still the correct decision to plan around that, as opposed to throwing up your hands in the air and going, oh, this is ridiculous, this should never have happened. It doesn't matter what happened previously. The correct decision is just to deal with what is in front of you now. Anyway, those are the odds, roughly. I would like to look at some more complicated versions of this fight, or possibly some others, but I think this video is long enough. So for now, I will leave you with one quick, simple tip that doesn't just apply to Crystal B here, but any time that you are bringing back boarders who are in real danger, and you just repaired your teleporter, really seriously, I'm not kidding here, consider getting into this habit. Move your crew out the room first, right? Just order them out the room, because then you can't do this, right? We didn't board by accident. It's surprisingly easy to click the wrong button or even the wrong hotkey because they're next to each other. So once you've done that, even if you haven't unpaused yet, you can't actually get it wrong. Anyway, hope that was interesting, and see you in the next one.